Welcome, guys, back to the Grateful Living podcast. Today, I'm thankful to have Earvin Casciano with me today. Earvin is a crisis counselor at the Crisis Text Line. The Crisis Text Line provides free 24/7 support via text message. Irvin, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Arnav. I'm grateful to be here.
Of course, thankful to have you. So, take us back to the beginning. Where you grew up, your family situation, and what type of kid you were.
Great. I grew up in Fort Dix, New Jersey, or Joint Base McGuire Dick Lakers, about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. Both my parents are Air Force veterans. That's how they met. So I lived on the base for about 14 years. And growing up in military culture, I knew what a commissary was. I knew military time. All that before I really knew what civilian grocery stores or really civilian life was really like. Being around all of those active duty military members and living in military housing, it has a way of just instilling certain qualities in you, such as discipline, such as hard work, such as um, keeping to a tight schedule, documentation. The type of kid that I was very shy. I was very shy, but I was always very kind and empathetic to anyone that I would ever meet. Everyone that I would talk to, I would come across would be very, very comfortable talking to me. And I started volunteering during around this time when I was around 8. That's when I also started acting and started um, pursuing football, which are two of my biggest passions even till now. But that really is what laid the framework of what I eventually grew to realize would be my life goal, which is to become a now I'm a crisis counselor on the crisis text line, and I'm also going into social work for my MSW to work with military veterans and their families to help with that population. And my background personally really served as the foundation for all this stuff happening now in my late 20s.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's awesome. Um, I guess, given what we're going to talk about today, do you remember the first time like you dealt with mental health issues?
Oh God, yeah. My entire life, really. Probably to put an age to it, probably 7, 8. That's when I started because I was really reserved. I was really shy, and growing up in the early 2000s, late 90s, and you and I being around the same age, introverted kids and shy kids who don't really talk much are seen as weird and or seen as out of the box when I really painted with one brush in terms of fitting in. So I had to deal with a lot of mental, you know, challenges as to that because I had low self-esteem growing up, and I always wanted people just to like me, and that's a human condition thing because we as human beings were made to connect to other people, but I was struggling a lot mentally with that. Just not really consciously, but subconsciously. This emotionally and subconsciously, I was dealing with all that. And then what really really jump started me into doing it was my experience with theater. That was really why I love theater arts so much. That's why I love the movie La La Land so much because that movie hits home to me in such personal way. Because I wanted to be an actor for the first time for growing up. That was like my first dream job. And there's something about getting on stage and acting in front of strangers and just not thinking about doing something and just doing it. Because in improv, we're taught to just do it. Don't think about it, just do it. And that is really what started to combat my mental health in terms of framing my mindset to be better and to not to start trusting myself more, and then move forward into my decision making through that trust process. And that was really what started it for me in terms of combating those mental health struggles early on.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And I'm curious, having two military veteran parents, what was that like?
Um, yeah, a lot of yelling, a lot of discipline. It was I had to do what they said when they said it without any questions. And then they would wonder why I wouldn't, or why I would do other things for other people without really thinking it through or without really questioning it. Because in the military culture, and any of your listeners who have any experience in the military, whether they're in the military themselves, they're veterans, or they're spouses of the military, you know that that culture is very, very much cut and dry. There's a strict hierarchy, and in that hierarchy, there's really no leg room and really no negotiation for it, really anything. In terms of I'll do it when I want to. No, you do it when you say when they tell you to, and that's about it. Otherwise, you get disciplined and you get in trouble. Um, and that was really what the framework was for me that I've had my entire life. I still have a buzz cut to this day, two on the top, one on the bottom. That is not going to change probably for the foreseeable future. But mostly, it translated to a severe amount, or a great deal amount of discipline in my mind. I'm a very, very hard critic of myself, way more than other people, just like I think a lot of people might be. But for me, it might be a little different because of just how high I keep my standards. And I don't give myself a pat on the back for doing things. If I do something, if I achieve something, I say, okay, great. What's on the next thing? I don't take the time to really sit down and actually bask in it. I just don't mention it. I just keep moving on, keep trucking along. And I wish I could. I'm working on it, but that's still a really, really hard thing to do when it's been programmed in your subconscious mind for like 17 plus years, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Uh, the spring of 2016, uh, you told me you were battling with thoughts of suicide. Do you want to just talk about what was going on, what got you there, and things of that nature?
Sure. It's a time that I'm never going to forget. It was the worst of my life, but it actually turned to be the best part of my life because that was really I remember it so clearly because it was such a dramatic turning point for me, both personally and professionally. So what was going on was a couple of things. I was working a part-time job at a retail place. New Jersey people and the people in the Northeast and Pennsylvania and Florida would know this as a Wawa. Um, it's pretty much like an equivalent to 7-Eleven, really. Um, and I was working part time there to at my dad's insistence to just pay my bills. I was working 45 hours a week, full time Monday through Friday at my school because I was student teaching at the time. I was a secondary education co-ed English major, so goals to be a high school English teacher. So I would be at North Brunswick Township High School from Monday to Friday, and then Saturday, Sunday I would be at Wawa just for the 8 hours or 7 hours or whatever. I wasn't engaging in any self care. I was just working constantly. I remember one time that I was behind on my lesson planning and I stayed up 24 straight hours to finish it. It's a meal and I drove to school that morning. It's a miracle that I got there safely and I didn't hurt myself or anybody else because I was asleep, really, which honestly, according to, you know, driving research, that's actually more dangerous than being drunk and drunk driving. And I was not present in class. I was falling asleep when I was just sitting there observing or waiting for I was just not focused. And I was also, on a personal note, I was also dealing with my first significant breakup at the time, my real first and only real relationship. We ended things on bad terms, and I was also dealing with that. Um, So I knew I needed to change and I was just failing. I was failing it. I was failing student teaching. I wasn't, taking care of myself. I wasn't opening up with my parents about it. I was barely opening up to my friends about it. I was keeping everything I was feeling inside until eventually all of those conflicting forces started bubbling up. And what I've learned from a book that I'm reading called Maybe You Should Talk to Someone by Lori Gottlieb. She's a psychotherapist. Is numbness is not the absence of feelings. It's the result of too many feelings. And that's a very, very important distinction. So I'll say it again for your listeners. Numbness is not the absence of feelings. It's the presence. It's the result of the presence of so many that you're not dealing with at the time. So your brain just shuts. Your brain, your heart, and your mind just shuts it all off to help you process it. Otherwise, you literally will not be able to move forward because of all that stuff that you're going through mentally and emotionally and psychologically. So everything came to a head in April. I got called in and then on top of all this, I was going to my college on Tuesday evenings from like 6 to 8. So I would leave my school on Tuesdays, and then I would go from there immediately to class, about an hour and a half drive, and then come back that night, and then go back to my secondary, and then go back to my school, but to my high school I was student teaching the next day.
Yeah.
It was constant, and I was dealing with not going out. I was dealing with all it was all work, no play, not talking to anybody really on what was going on until eventually my professor called me into her office and told me that she suggested that I withdraw because I wasn't going to pass it. I was not doing great on my observations. And then I'm not a person who grew up, with the mindset of failing in anything that I do. I grew up with the mindset of I'm expected to excel, not just do things, but excel at them. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's bagging. It doesn't matter if it's grocery shopping. It doesn't matter what the fuck it is. It doesn't matter. It's you excel at it, whatever the hell it is. Period. And that's a mindset that also derives from the military, and that derives from my parents, and I'm very, very grateful for them for that. But that's again another conflicting force that I was dealing with on a subconscious level. And everything came into a head, and then I knew I was gonna fail it, and then that's when I started contemplating taking my own life. I didn't plan it out. I didn't Let me be clear, I only had suicidal ideation. I did not think about a plan. I did not think it through because the thoughts enough were just enough of a scare for me. And then because I didn't trust my parents enough to talk to them about what was going on until I absolutely had to, I went out to a local park and I stayed on the phone. I stayed outside for like 4 hours with my friends, with my close friends, and they knew who they are. Um, and that's when I told them everything. So I opened the floodgates and I let everything out, everything, and they helped me see things. I contemplated dropping out of school, even though I'm 5 classes away from a bachelor's degree, which would not have been the smartest thing. So, and then eventually I talked to my parents about it. We had, a very, very long conversation about it, and then I got their support after a while. Excuse me, I got their support after a while, and then eventually it led me back to my college where I finished with a bachelor's in English literature, and then and that was in the May of 2017. That whole so spring of 2016 to May 2017, that was what was going on with doing that process.
Irvin, part of the reason that I started this obviously deals with the fact that I've lost two people in the last 2 years to suicide. So, it's something that's close to my heart. And, um, as you look back at your journey, you know, having the hindsight of what you have and now having the learnings that you've had as you've grown up since then, uh, what would you have suggested to that Irvin in 2016 or the years before that might have led up to that?
Engaged in self care, period. Because if I don't take care of myself, who the hell is going to take care of me? Ultimately, yes, I'll have family. Yes, I'll have friends that will play a part in it, and they always will. But I, you have and engage in self care, and you have to know yourself first. You have to know yourself. You have to know how you react to certain things. And I think I knew even back then, I knew on a subconscious level but consciously I wasn't able to bring it up. And the importance of communication in all relationships is something that I'm still learning how to really do. I avoid conflict at all costs. It put to the point that it's very detrimental, which isn't great. But that was the biggest reason that my ex and I broke up, was due to lack of communication. Um, so the importance of communicating and engaging in self care and having balance, having a work life balance, that's critical and very difficult to do, because in this U.S. culture that we live in, it's always go go go. It's always work work work, and then there's not enough time to sit down and really engage in fun things. And even people who are going through mental health struggles, which a lot of people are, especially due to COVID now, and I'm seeing that on my experience in the crisis text line, um, now more than ever before. Mental health is still very much stigmatized in this country. But if you're going to, if you're going to, if you have a physical injury and you have a pain and it continues to, be there, and you feel it and it's a physical pain, you wouldn't wait to go to the doctor. Just because it's in your mind and it's mental doesn't mean it's not there. Just because we can't see it and it's not concrete and tangible doesn't mean it's not there. Why would you wait? If we would do that for our physical needs and for the dentist and everything else, why wouldn't we do that for our mental needs, which are just as important as the physical, if not more so, because the mind follows the body. So that's a little bit of what I would tell myself that I wish I knew earlier on. I wish I knew the importance of self care for sure, and the importance of communicating openly and honestly with my loved ones.
100%. That's awesome advice. Um, I guess, and maybe you just answered that. Um, there might be someone out there, um, and obviously you're not a doctor or anything like that, but just from your experience, for anybody out there that might be dealing with those issues right now, listening to this podcast, um, is there anything else that you want to add? Obviously, you said self care and creating work life balance. Does anything else come to mind?
Talk to somebody, anybody, someone that you, well, not anybody, but someone that you feel comfortable with talking to and being vulnerable with. There's something called that I'm learning about on another. There's something that I'm teaching myself that's called safe conversations. And in any space of a relationship, when we think about a relationship, we think about two people, but there's also the space in between those two people, the energy that's in between those two people, that is also a part of that relationship. And if it's not safe, then none of those other things will happen. If you don't feel if you're not, if it doesn't feel safe, then you're not going to feel um listened to, valued, and you're not going to want to be vulnerable to them. And if you're not vulnerable with them, then you cannot make a connection with them. And once you can't make that connection with them, you can't grow closer together, and the relationship can't deepen on a psychological and mental level. So talk to anybody. It's sometimes a lot of our textures on CTL have the option of just talking to us, and actually our busiest times are early in the morning, between like 2 and 4 a.m. That's really when we get a lot of textures on, because a lot of these are young kids and they're young teens, but they're dealing with anxiety, depression, teenage pregnancy, relationship issues, suicidal ideation. Those are just the top three off the top of my head, top three or four. Um, and they find it helpful that they're talking to someone that they don't know. So talk to someone you don't know. Talk to somebody that will allow you to feel comfortable and safe, and engage in a way that is that allows you to engage in a way that allows you that person to be vulnerable. And the best way to do that is to be is for you to let the other person know that you first care, that you're not distracted, you're not playing your own movie in your head. You know, you have something to say to someone and you're nervous to say it to them, whether it's your significant other, your parent, your friend, whatever. Say, hey, are you available to talk about something that's important? And then that way the person can make a decision on a conscious level to say, am I gonna engage in this conversation or not? And once they decide if they're gonna engage in it, then then maybe request that they be fully present, no phones, if it's a very, very serious conversation that needs to be had one on one, and just be fully present, because that's how people feel heard and that's how people feel listened to. And no matter what skin tone we are, no matter what religion we are, no matter where we come from, no matter what language we speak, we are human beings, and that's a universal condition. And we are universally conditioned to be to seek out and keep connections on platonic, romantic, sexual, on all kinds of levels. Um, so that would be my advice in the short run of anything. Just talk to somebody. Talk to someone that you feel that you can trust and you can be vulnerable with, because it will open up a load of doors for you. And once you feel comfortable with that person, then eventually more floodgates and more secrets will come out, and you'll start feeling lighter and lighter, and your baggage will just slowly trickle out to this person, and you'll feel much lighter at the end of it. I promise you.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice because when you're in those spaces, you're feeling overwhelmed, and the overwhelmingness can lead to just feeling like, um, you know, just too much. Um, one other aspect I'm curious about is, obviously, with the people that I've lost and so forth, as friends and family, you question, what you could have done more to help. As you look back at your journey, was there anything your friends and family could have done, or was this really? Is it more of a self recognition? That I need help and things of that nature.
It it's That's an interesting question. It's twofold. So I believe it starts with the self, because you shouldn't be in a especially a romantic relationship with someone else if you don't know yourself very well. Because when we think about relationships, we always think about the relationships with, and I mentioned this in the Peace Corps and Fiji, and I'm sure we'll get to that um, later on. But when we think about relationships, we always typically think about two people. But what I told my kids in Fiji, and what I started learning about, you know, within myself when I started studying social work in Fiji, was there's there's one more relationship that trumps all of it, and that is the relationship that you have with yourself. Because if you don't know yourself and you don't know your boundaries and your wants and your needs and your ethics and your values and everything else that comes together as a person, how in the world can you communicate that to anybody else, whether it's a romantic partner, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a mentor? If a mentor asks you, how can I help you achieve your goals? How do you know what your goals are if you haven't thought about it? If you haven't taken the time to work on yourself to realize, this is what I want, this is what I really need. And sometimes you just got to trust your gut feeling. That's really what's done it for me. Is throughout after that, after I graduated college from my undergrad and I got my bachelor's degree, I went out to South Florida. I did AmeriCorps, then I did went to Peace Corps in Fiji, and that's really what started my journey. I was doing all of those things really on a gut instinct, saying, okay, I'm going to apply again to the Peace Corps. I'm going to apply to AmeriCorps, and then I'm just going to do it. I didn't start thinking about it and second guessing myself. I just said, my gut, something in my body, in my heart, in my mind told me that this is what I needed to do, and I did it. And then it transpired all of us to where I'm at. This it led to really where I'm at today. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is I would say is just be mindful of who you have around you. And just make sure the people you have around you are people that you can 100% trust and be vulnerable with, and you like being around, and they like you, because people will. And this is something else that I learned way longer than I wish I learned sooner, and I wish I could tell my like 15, 18-year-old self, 17-year-old self, whatever, that um people will talk to the people they want to talk to. People will make time for the people they want to make time for, especially as adults, where our time is so limited. But you will know that they care about you very quickly if you just look at it like, are they always responding to my texts in a timely manner? Are they always, available to talk whenever I, need them? Are they reaching out to me? Am I not the one? Am I not just reaching out to them? Are they also reaching out to me and seeing how I'm doing? All of those things, So start with yourself, and then keep a close knit of people, no matter how many it is. Could be 20, could be one, could be five, could be seven. I'm fortunate enough to have about 8 or 9 people in my close circle that I've talked to. I grew up with two guy friends that we haven't seen each other in over 15 years, but we talk, and we don't talk all that often. We might talk once a month or once a year, but it's like no time has passed, and they always make time for me because they always respond in a timely manner. So that's how you know. So look at how people are treating you when you respond to them. Are you the only one responding to them, or are they reaching out to you? And then, because it's a balancing act. Both of them, it takes a relationship takes work on both ends in order for it to be healthy. That's a key distinction, and not toxic. So that's something to keep in mind for your listeners.
Yeah. You mentioned it a little bit, but do you want to talk about your time in Fiji and for the Peace Corps?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I can't talk about Fiji until I talk about my American experience, which is what led me to apply again.
Yeah.
I applied in March. I applied originally to Ukraine as a community economic development volunteer. We had a Peace Corps recruiter of South Florida come to our training one Friday in November of 2017, and I spoke to him, and then I told him of my experience of applying before, and I didn't get in, and then I'm just trying again, and this is the program that I was looking at, and he was very helpful. And then I applied in November. The cutoff date was March, so I finished my application around late November, mid December of 2017. The cutoff date is March 1st. I didn't hear anything for like 2 months. So all of December goes away, all of January goes away. I heard nothing. I was starting to panic. And then February 7th, 2018, I get an email from a placement officer in a DC office, and that placement officer tells me, Earvin, I've looked over your Earvin, my name is so and so. I've looked over your, resume. You look like a better qualification. You look better suited for the Community Economic Empowerment Project, the CYEP project in Fiji. I would like to, arrange an interview with you. If you wanna respond to this email, please let me know. Um, if you're interested, please let me know. And then I emailed him immediately. Yes, and then we set up the interview for literally February 13th, which is 6 days from then. And then I came home from my school that I was working at. I told my roommates I was having a interview, so when they just came in the apartment to just be as quiet as possible. And they were very gracious. They went right upstairs until I was done, and then I had the interview, and then less than 24 hours later, on February 14th, 2018, at 2 p.m., I get the email that says I was invited. And that was the same day that the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school shooting in Parkland, Florida, which I was about 45 minutes from, by the way. My school was about 45 minutes from there. It happened. So that day is always bittersweet because of that day, but also that was the day that I got my um invitation. I was jubilant to say the least because that was one of my dreams ever since I was 17 for a lot of reasons, and I did it. And then I left finally after being cleared legally and medically in late August, and then I went to Fiji. I didn't speak the language as well as I should have, or as well as I wanted to, but had a very, very productive service because of my commitment to the village, commitment to my people. And again, even though I didn't speak the language with them, even though I didn't speak the language, they still knew that I cared about them and I loved them. And they knew that because of how hard I busted my behind for them in all ways. And then circle that down to circle that down to around had to be August of 2019. I was in Labasa with a very good friend of mine, one of my best girlfriends, and she's the one who told me we were having dinner because her service was ending in October, so this was like our last big hangout together, her and I. And she told me, Irvin, you would make an amazing social worker. And that was the first time that I've heard those words, and I heard of that profession. And then in Peace Corps, as all Peace Corps volunteers would know, who might be listening to this, or if there was anyone interested in the Peace Corps, you have a lot of time in your host country, more than you have in America because there's not as many distractions. So I used that time productively, and I started researching social work. I started researching what I would like, what I would not like, what kind of population I would want to do. Oh, excuse excuse me. What schools would I want to go into? And the more I realized, and the more I researched it, the more I realized that this is absolutely it. Because I have always been this way. I've always been the person that people like coming to. People find myself. I'm very, very easy to talk to. I've had that happen a million times. My heart is very, very wide and very vast. I'm a very empathetic individual. I'm a very kind person. I'm a very, very caring individual. And all of those things were put to the forefront in my Peace Corps service. And the more I looked into social work values and what that profession entails, the more I realized that this was it for me. And this is what it still is for me.
Yeah. And I guess that led you to thinking about joining the crisis text line as a
That,
crisis counselor.
that is exactly what led me to it because I came back from due to the COVID-19 pandemic. All 7,300 volunteers were part of the first ever mandatory evacuation. So around when the pandemic first hit in America in March of 2020, I was still in Fiji all the way up until March 18th of 2020 was when I came back. And I was very dazed and I was very confused and very traumatized and heartbroken. But I had an adjunct professor at the University of Southern California who who suggested to me who I built that networking connection abroad in Fiji. And she told me, did you look into the crisis text line? Look into volunteering for the crisis text line. And then I looked into it, and then I got back in May. I got back in like mid March of 2020. Within 10 days, I was in training. I was in the 30-hour training regimen for CTO. I wasn't waiting. I wasn't debating. I was just saying, okay, this is great. This is going to be great for my resume and boost it. And I started doing that. Started doing the training, and then I was officially on the platform by late April of 2020. And then once you get on, you have 200 hours. You have a year to do 200 hours of you have your year to do 200 hours on the platform. It's all online. You can do it on a laptop as long as you have a laptop or a computer or internet connection. You're fine. And they recommend doing 2 hours a night and 4 hours a week. So that's only 2 nights. So I would do typically. I used to do like Monday, Tuesday from like 8 to 10, or from like 10 to 12, and then eventually I went Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then I would do 6 hours, and then I would be gaining up another day, and I did it those 200 hours in 9 months instead of 12. because I was just that disciplined in that, and I enjoyed it. I had time on my hands, and I enjoyed it, and it really really helped me build my empathy skills and build my future therapy skills, and really just tweak and sharpen the natural skills that I already have as an empath. And it was one of the greatest decisions I've ever made.
Yeah. Obviously they probably give you a lot of training, but when you get tough questions like people thinking about hanging themselves or things of that nature, how do you keep yourself calm and try to calm them down and things of that nature?
That's a great question. The If you're calm, the biggest challenge I would say is to keep yourself calm as the person they're reaching out to. Because if you're calm, then they will be calmer, or they would have the potential to be calmer. There was something that also Lloyd Gottlieb, who's again a psychotherapist based in Los Angeles, I read this in her book, and then also in interviews that I've listened to her. There's something called that neurologists have researched that's called mirror neurons. So if you're talking to someone in distress, if the other person, in this case it would be me, is calm, whether it's a text message, whether it's in voice, whether it's however form of communication, if one person is in distress, the other person's calm, then that other person will eventually be calm, because on a psychological level, in the brain chemistry, your calmness will rub off on them. Because it definitely wouldn't help if I was starting to be hysterical and starting being, doing asking them a bajillion questions, and then that could be accusations, which would be not the best way to handle it. Um, so that would be the first thing to keep in mind, is to stay calm and remind yourself why you're doing it. Remind yourself that, and speak from the heart. Honestly, that's really what I do. I don't. People ask me, how I say the right things, or how I've always been able to just calm people down and just talk them down about whatever it is. And it could be very, 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 very tough conversations. I've had textures that were in the bathroom, and they're self harming themselves as they're texting me. And then I ask them, just first of all, I acknowledge what they're doing, because I'm not gonna hide it. I'm not gonna turn a blind eye to it, because that would not help them as well. I acknowledge what they're doing, and then I ask them, and I request to them. I don't, yell at them. I don't voice frustrations. I politely request, hey, is this a good time to maybe think about putting this down, so we can just be present and you can talk. And this is part of the safe conversations that I was mentioning before, a little bit earlier. And I say it in a very natural way, the way that I've always done it, and 9 times out of 10, they'll stop, or at least they'll put it down, and they might pick it up later, but at least now they're fully present with me, because they know I've opened that line of communication in that space to let them know fully that this is a safe space, that you can be vulnerable with me. And then eventually, once they get that, it's you hit the ground running, and then gets and then progress is made quite quickly once that's established.
Yeah. Um, obviously I don't want anybody to be in a state, where I don't wish them to be in a state where they need to text, the crisis hotline. But can you talk to us about, who can use this service and, you know, um, who it's meant for?
It's meant for anybody. There's no age. I mean, typically we have teenagers, but it's meant for anybody. It's meant for anyone in distress. But I will say that there is something that we have, like a if you have 20, if you text, it's meant for anybody and will always heal for you. But do not think of our line as like your go-to for therapy. We would encourage you to seek out a professional counselor, because we have limitations on our platform, um, for our textures safety and ours mentally. and emotionally. So if someone texts 20 times over the course of like 30 days, and then they continue to do it like 15 conversations in like 7 days or something like that, they'll be deemed by our supervisors as what's called a chronic texture. So what that means is you wouldn't be able to text the crisis text line until after 48 hours. We're here for you in a pinch. We're here for you whenever we need you. But I would encourage your listeners to not think of CTL as a replacement for professional therapy. A lot of us are going into school for professional therapy. A lot of us are social workers, including myself. While I'm trying to become a licensed clinical social worker, while I'll be able to be a therapist, and the crisis text line serves as my foundation for that work. It serves as my foundation for how I deal with patients, for how I deal with future clients, and it's giving me that foundation of how to interact with them. But do not think of us as your go-to resource. Think of us as an additional outside of the box resource that you need to in a pinch, but don't think of us as a substitute for licensed professional therapy, because we are not. And any of the crisis text line, any of the crisis counselors besides myself will tell you that, because eventually our system will block you if you or will not allow you to log on as much as you did before, because of if you become too overly reliant on it, that might be doing more harm than good, which is defeats our exact purpose. So if you need help, we have resources to point you in the right direction for a therapist, or what have you. Or you could also look up what's called a resource that I'm using and have used called Better Help. So BETTER help.com. That's a online therapy platform. That's all online. It's all virtual. You pay a fee of like $230 for the month, and you have unlimited communication with your therapist, unlimited video calls as long as within that time period, and it's very very helpful. So that's one resource, and there's also other resources. There's other podcasts on Spotify. There's other besides yours. There's also Better Relationships podcast. There's Better Help. There's Crisis Text Line. There's so many other avenues. So I would encourage them to have Crisis Text Line not just be the one for them, but have Crisis Text Line be a supplement to one of the main ones for them, and have a few other options.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Irvin, we talked about a good amount. Was there something you wanted to talk about that we didn't?
Um, yeah, I mean, realize that anyone who's going through mental health struggles, because we are absolutely in a terrible, crisis with this. Mental health stigmatization is still very much there, but reach out to somebody, reach out to the crisis text line, which you can find out from if you text if you have Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, any of the major carriers, and I will all over the U.S. and I think in Ireland as well. If you text, at least in the U.S., if you text 741 741, and you text home in all caps to 741 741, you'll get in contact with us. You could also Google search crisis text line to to find out what that link is, and then find out a little bit more about the platform. We're also, I think, still looking for more volunteers. You could also look it up on that. If anyone has any questions, they can email me at Earvin Casciano, EarvinCasciano at yahoo.com. If they have any questions, or if they want to talk to me about their struggles, I'm also open to listening to that, because in the end you matter. In the end, every life matters. you know every life has human value, and I say that not as a future social worker, but as just a human being, because there's a tattoo that I have on my body that is one of my favorite quotes. It's from a play with by George Orwell. And I have it. It's one mindless, one worldless. And again, I'll say it again. So it's one mindless and then one worldless, which means that every single one of us has a brain, and in that brain is our own world, which derives from how we see the world that we live in, all 7.2 billion of us. And how we see that world is derived from our experiences, the good and the bad. So if on Nav, if you and I were to look at, a painting, at a museum, you and I would interpret it two different ways based off of our experiences, first and foremost. And that's just anything psychologically. That's just anything with anybody. But there's common ground with anyone if you don't speak the same language, if you don't look alike. We all have a beating heart. We all have a brain. We all have body parts. We all have the same desires and same tribulations and everything else. And that's what universally connects us as humans. That's part of what it means to be human. And that's part of the human condition. Um, and we have a long way to go with mental health, but I am confident and hopeful that we'll get to where we need to be. I hope I helped, some of your colleagues and some of your listeners, and I'm excited to continue my dream of becoming a social worker. And I want to thank my friends. I want to thank my family. I want to thank you for letting me talk about this. I want to thank my AmeriCorps team. I want to thank my Peace Corps team. I want to thank my best friend for giving me the social work career that she did and planting that seed in my head. She knows who she is. She knows how much I love her. I love all my best friends. And just be kind. You know, there's so much chaos and cynicism and tension and racial inequality, and just be kind. We need more kindness. And I know it's difficult, and I know you want to be, what you possibly treat someone the same way that they treated you, but be better than that. Think about being better than that. Not just for you, but for the next person, for the younger generations. Right now with all this police inequality and police injustice and racial inequality that we're seeing, that COVID has absolutely brought up, the worst of America in terms of all the racial inequality, that we have, the racial inequalities that we have in our education, education, criminal justice, health, mental health, military. It's all over the place. It's all over the place, and it's got to stop. It's got to stop. And we have an obligation as the United States of America, because there are developing countries that still look to us like the gold standard, and we are not at all living up to that standard, and that breaks my heart. But I know this first and foremost because I experienced it in Fiji. Like, they looked at America as the gold standard. I was an American. I was considered a white guy. They looked at me like I had a lot of money, like I had this, like I had that, because that's all they saw in the news. But again, if you're only exposed to one side of something, you're only going to get one side of something. So I would encourage people to be more open minded, more empathetic, more sympathetic, more loving, more kind, more giving. And then eventually together we'll rise up as a humanity.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome final reflection. Irvin, I just want to thank you. Um, I know how tough it can be to publicly come out and, admit that you have mental health issues or have faced those in the past, with the stigma that exists and, people not wanting that to be publicly out there. And so I thank you a ton for, sharing your story. Um, and giving your pieces of advice. Hopefully, anyone that listens who may or may not be in a bad place can find the help and happiness that they deserve. Um, and yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. This was awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.